Do you know those women who make you go, wait, she did what? Debora Masterson, she's one of those women. I got to sit down today and talk to Debora about her amazing life, all of the things she's done up until this point. She was recruited by Sammy Davis Jr. as a teenager to be a dancer. She ran one of LA's first boutique post production talent agencies. She produced documentaries for PBS and for Bravo. She got a master's degree in French. She now plays bass in a rock band, and she's about to sing solo with the bass for the first time ever. Now, at this stage of her life, she published a book called Freedom Quest, a love story, which came out in April. And here's what gets me. The book is a tribute to her late partner, Craig. It's about her life and about his life and about their life together and this love story, but it's also based on the true story of a band called Freedom Quest, which, by the way, the music is real. It's streaming on Spotify right now. Please go listen to it because it is such a cool vibe. I think that you'll really, really like it. But this story has been living in her head for decades, and she finally put it out. So today we're talking about all of it, creative reinvention. We're talking about what it actually takes to finish a book and what happens when love and music kind of merge together, and what happens when you just say yes and you're not afraid and you get rid of the fear. So, without further ado, welcome back to the Midlife Edit. And here's my conversation with Debora Masterson. Debora Masterson, welcome to the Midlife Edit.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for you to be here. And we're just going to get right into it, starting off with your newest endeavor, because you are what I call a serial, and I don't even want to say entrepreneur. You are a serial enthusiast of all things awesomeness.
Oh, thank you.
And so I want to talk a lot about your life, but I really want to get into Freedom Quest because it's this book that you've had in your life forever inside your mind, right? Because it's based on a true story, but it's your newest endeavor and it's about a real life band that you were in, but also your late partner founded. And I actually was listening to some of the songs today on Spotify. How cool. I
Yeah.
As soon as I started listening, I was like, wow, I think that this is the reason the word groovy became groovy. You know?
That's great. Yeah.
Big fan of jam bands, so I love the jamming out and things like that. But I want to get into it. Tell me about Freedom Quest. It is based on a on your life with
True.
some
It's
interesting
actually
stuff.
more based on my late partner's life, and his real name is Craig Ingraham. So, he was the founder of the band, and the name of the book is Freedom Quest, and it's also the name of the band, which was a 1973 band, arguably the pinnacle of his musical career, which spanned 50 years. He was quite a unique and had quite an unconventional and adventurous life. And so it's really his story, but then, we were madly in love. So it's my story too. So, Freedom Quest, is the name of the band, but our love affair, we met when we were very young. I was only 15 and he was already 18. So that was a little bit of a problem. I was not even in high school yet, wasn't driving, couldn't date. So he had just graduated from high school, already had a band, and back in the day, musicians right out of high school would often get fake IDs. And so he was already playing in bars and clubs. They had a manager already, so they were traveling all over the United States. So our relationship, when he was in town, he would come over to the house. He loved being over at my house because it was a very musical family. My dad played piano, my mom sang. We all sang together, very musical family, which is portrayed in the book. But when a lot of times it was just calls from a payphone when they were on the road, telling me how much he loved me and how we were gonna be forever together and we were gonna get married and everything. And so yeah, it didn't quite turn out that way. We went together for 7 years. I broke up with him 6 times in 7 years. I loved him
You didn't get the hint,
crazy.
huh?
It was a crazy time, and he was a rock and roll musician, And, I remember at one time there's a scene in the book where he's calling me from a payphone, and there weren't, no cell phones, right, back then. It was up in San Francisco, 1967, during the Summer of Love. And, standing outside in a payphone outside the motel where they were staying along the ocean, and I remember I say, and I'm Grace in the book. So he's Michael, I'm Grace. I changed all the names. And I say to him, can you come to my prom? My prom's coming up. And there's total silence on the other end. And he's like, I can't. I'm on the road. I've got a gig. I can't. And so there's a little sniveling in the background, and I'm like, you love your music more than me. And he said, well, not exactly. I love you equally. And that's when I realized I would have to share him with his guitars and his music and his musician friends, bands, and all of that. So anyway, it's a real love story. We lost track of each other. The band was short lived. He got busted for marijuana. He got set up by his one of his roadies. He was trying to get enough money to finish the album so he could get a record deal. And one of the roadies set him up. He was actually on probation. And so it all fell apart. He lost all the members of the band moved on. He lost the record deal, and then I broke up with him, lost track of him. So 26 years later, he walks back into my life, and I realized I was still in love with him. And it's so crazy because one of the themes of the book is like serendipity, coincidence, kismet, whatever. How does this happen? Because the way I met him the first time, he was the guitar teacher for my son. I'm sorry, guitar teacher
Your
for
brother.
my brother. Yeah. Fast forward, 26 years later, I'm looking for a guitar teacher for my youngest son, and that's how we reconnected. So it was just,
Serendipity for music. Amazing.
yeah, just absolutely crazy. So that's one of the big themes of the book. Is a lot of things, in our relationship in my life have worked like that. Really crazy. Like, how does that happen? So yeah, so that's one of the themes of the book. And then another theme is like, what is true success? We, got back in touch with each other, reconnected, and found out I was still madly in love with him. And so we ended up having 20 years together before he passed away.
I'm so sorry for your loss. I know that
Yeah.
that has to be the hardest thing.
Yeah.
This book took you 6 years to write, though. You had the idea in 2011 and it didn't start writing and putting it together until 2020. What
Right.
finally made you go, okay, this is it? This is what I'm going to do?
Well, he had passed away by then. And I guess also, we would tell people our story a lot. So when we got back together in 2000, we would tell people, oh, yeah, we lost track of each other. We got back together. And the response was always, oh, I love that. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, you should write it down. You should write a book, right? Or, it's so inspiring. Maybe I can find my soulmate, and does it truly exist? And, all that. And so, we had heard that so often. Well, then he passed away in 2020, and he died 3 days before the pandemic started. Yeah. And it wasn't pandemic, it wasn't COVID related. He had been sick for about 4 years. So I had really become his caregiver for the last 4 years. And so he was gone, and about 5 months later, so he died in March, and in August, I remember talking to a group of ladies again and telling my story, and they went, you have to write this. And I went, okay, that's it, I'm doing it. And I remember the next morning I woke up and I started writing, and I was writing 6 hours a day at the beginning, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours after lunch, and then 2 hours in the evening, or maybe longer. It was just coming out of me. And I think I was channeling Michael. His name is Michael in the book, Craig Ingram. I just, it was all coming out. And he had wanted to write his story. And actually, one of his friends in high school, who became a very, very successful writer, they had started to write his story, but he got busy on another project. And then, I ended up writing it. So it's definitely a great story. It was something that had to be done. So I ended up doing it.
That's amazing. There is a part in it where you said that you are not in the book, but you went through six potential titles for this book, right? And it was
Yeah.
a beta reader who finally said, "You know what the title is, right?" So tell me that story. Like, what were the six potential titles? Like, what were you thinking when you were trying to
Yeah.
figure that out?
Yeah, obviously I wasn't coming up with the right title. So the first title was Fate. Then there was a title, Michael and Grace, the story of Michael and Grace. I had what was this, Bum Monk, the story of Bum Monk. Because occasionally, I mean, he was sort of like this bum because he couldn't hold down a job. The only jobs he ever had was music, or he would get odd jobs to pay so he could go back into the studio and record more of his music. So I called him a bum monk because he acted like a monk. He At one point he wanted to be a priest. He went into the seminary to become a
Oh
Catholic
wow.
priest, and he really did live kind of a solitary life. I mean, it was just all about music. He ended up towards the end of his life, he had his own studio. uh, well, he had his own studio from the age of 14 in his guest house in the back of the family home. But towards the end, he did everything. I mean, he could play drums, bass, piano, and his primary instrument was guitar. And so, he recorded quite a number of songs all by himself, and you would never know it. I mean, it sounds like an entire band. So, yeah. So, but Bum Monk, oh gosh, I don't know. It just went through a lot of them. And then, yeah, I was getting notes from one of my fellow writers, Karen Green, one day, and this was late. I had already signed a contract with the publisher, if I'm not mistaken. It was very right around the time I signed my contract. And so she was kind of doing last minute notes with me, and I was on the phone with her. And at the end, she says, "You know what your title is, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, obviously not," because, nothing was sticking. She goes, "Freedom Quest." And I'm, "Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, it hit me." And, I was looking for a song, some like lyrics. I was looking for lyrics from one of Craig's songs, or I was looking for a song title, but I didn't think about the name of the band. For some reason it was, I couldn't see the forest for the trees, right?
Yep. Sometimes somebody else needs to just say, "Hey, look, it's right here. Hi."
Exactly. Yeah.
So in the press release, it says that you, quote, change the names to, quote, protect the innocent and the guilty. I love that. So you're writing about your late partner's life and all of these people in it. Were you nervous to release it? Like, what are these people going to think when I tell the story? Or were you excited? Or tell me how you felt when you were writing it about what other people were going to think about it.
Well, I think all of the above, right?
Yeah.
But I think as a writer, you have to be true to yourself. So I was trying not to double think, what would they think about this? What would they think? I was just trying to tell the story as best I could. However, I think once it was published, that's when I started getting nervous. Um, for example, the divorce is in there. I was married at the time with two children when I reconnected with Craig, or Michael, in the book. And so that was difficult. My husband, my former husband, and he's remarried and he's very happy and everything's good. My kids are okay. They understood. They actually were close with Craig, and everything is good, I think, and but I think that was my biggest concern is, but there was no other way to write the story. It had to be there. So I texted my husband and his wife, and I said, my former husband and his wife, and I said, this is a novel based on a true story, and you can deny everything if you want, right? I just left it at that. So, and actually, there's a part of the divorce part where I actually increased the drama. I dramatized it, so it's not all true. There's just a couple of places where I made it worse than it really was because that's what you do as a writer. And one of my a professional writer, a friend who kind of was encouraging me and helping me along the way because this is my debut novel, right? I'd never written a long foreign book before. And he said, you know what? That's just part of writing is, writers are always going to compromise other people. That, you can't get away from that. And then, there's the part of where Michael, after I left him, he spirals downward into a terrible place. He joins a religious cult in Hawaii. And so I knew that because I had met like three or four of the cult members, and I knew that they didn't want to be, have their real names in it. So for that reason too, I want to respect other people. So I just changed everybody's names. They can deny everything they want.
That's right. So you said that there's a big difference between being a writer and being an author.
Mm.
The marketing, the contracts, all the public speaking, all the unfun stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
Now that you're on the author side, what do you wish that somebody would have told you? I mean, it sounds like you have a very good community around you, that you have friends who are writers, but is there something that they maybe left out that you wish you would have known before all of this became what it is?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is how long it takes to publish a book. So it takes a long time to write it. And then for some reason, I thought once I signed the deal with a publisher that I could get it out in, 4 or 5 months, but it took 9 months, and that is actually fast. So, traditional publishing, if you went with one of the Simon and Schuster, top notch, top five, they call them, it could be a year and a half, 2 years before your book comes out, even though it's written, right? So I think that was the biggest learning curve for me. Was I had plans. I thought it was going to get it out in, March, April. Well, it came out April 21st. I mean, Atmosphere Press did a fantastic job. They really did work hard to try to hit my deadlines. But yeah, that was, I think, my biggest learning curve was how long it would take. Yeah.
So when this episode comes out, it'll be right before Father's Day. And I know, on your Instagram, you were talking about why this would be such a good Father's Day gift. What about a father who maybe doesn't read a lot? Why do you think that this would be the book to get them back into reading, or to get them into reading?
Well, it's got a soundtrack. If they like music, which I think is kind of unusual, and this, which is kind of organic. I mean, the Freedom Quest album has been up streaming on all the streaming platforms since 2011, and so now the book has come along, and it's pretty cool that you can listen to the music of the original band and then read a book about it. And I think, from what I've been told, it moves really fast. So it's a quick read. Um, I think from that standpoint, someone who doesn't read a lot might really like it. Behind the scenes, funny stories, crazy stories about, the band members and what they were up to. I mean, and there's some funny stuff in there, I think, which were all stories that Michael Craig dictated to me before he passed, because I wasn't on the road with them at that point. I was still in high school.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I think that you can kind of, when you read it too, you can kind of see. Like, I'm a reader who, when I read a book, I envision I make it up in my own mind. I love books that turn into movies, but I always get disappointed when the movie doesn't match what I
Oh,
thought.
I totally agree. I always like the book better. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So this is such a book where it takes you to that space. Like, you can think back and think of the payphone. Like, you're standing at the payphone with your bell bottoms on and your and there's people behind you, and you're trying not to listen to the groupies who are yelling for them, like that's what I picture when I read the book. So I think that it's very transformative. It can take you back to that place. The writing just makes you go there. So if you're listening and you have a man in your life for Father's Day that you need to get a book, cool. If not, get it for yourself. Read it on the beach. Like, it just takes you back. And I think it's a simpler time, even though it's a very complex story and there's a lot of different things to it. It takes you back to a much simpler time where you don't have to be connected to the phone all the time, and seeing how hard that can be to keep in touch with somebody who is across the country sometimes. And think about that. Like, wow, what would have that been like that long ago? But now you can just you have Life 360 on your phone. You know where they are every
Yes.
second of the day.
So true. So true. Yeah, I remember when I lost track of Michael, or Craig Ingram. So I broke up with him after he went to jail. I just got scared. There were a lot of groupies, a lot of drugs, a lot of people going in and out of our house. We were rehearsing the band at our little bungalow house in San Diego. And, I mean, I just got scared. And then when he got busted and went to jail, I'm like, man, what am I doing? And so I broke up with him. And then I heard through the grapevine from I think it was one of the other band members, hey, did you hear Craig moved to Hawaii? And I'm like, what? So again, not having cell phones, we didn't really stay in touch that much. So, like 2 or 3 weeks went by, and all of a sudden, hey, did you hear he moved to Hawaii? And I'm like, it's so funny because I was mad at him. Like, how dare he move to Hawaii? And I thought,
Why didn't you tell me?
broke up with him. Yeah. I mean, I still love the heck out of him, but yeah, so he moved to Hawaii. And then I thought to myself, well, okay, another example, no cell phones, right? I could have picked up, texted him or whatever, right? No, I like, well, I don't know where he is, but I could call his mom. And I bet you his mom has his phone number in Hawaii. So I thought about doing that, but I'm like, no, no, you're not going to do it. I was trying to kind of, I don't know, I just got scared. It was
Yeah.
just a crazy time. I mean, we had a bowl of chocolate mescaline on our living room table. It was too nuts.
Could you imagine now, though, like thinking TMZ has this big article that the front man of a band gets arrested for marijuana? People would just be like, what? Like, what is happening?
No, yeah, I know. And I thought that was a kind of a sad, ironic part of the story, that he went to jail. He went to jail for 3 days, and then the judge said, "Son, I know you're not a hardened criminal. I don't want to see you back here ever again." So he gave him 6 weeks in honor camp, which was, out East San Diego, beautiful place. I went and visited him once. It was like outdoors, very minimal security. They cut fire breaks with the fire department. That was what they did during the day. Played basketball. I mean, it was really beautiful out there, but they were in jail, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't go anywhere, and yeah, and everything fell apart. But yeah, so.
Well, it's a beautiful love story. It really is, and it's one that's relatable because I think a lot of times when we read, and don't get me wrong, there's some amazing writers out there, amazing romance novels, but when we get lost in them, it's like, oh, could this really happen? But yours really did,
Yeah.
and that's just it's very relatable. So I want to make sure, when we're finished here, I'm going to link everything in the show notes. We're going to make sure that people go out and check it out and listen to the Spotify playlist because
Oh, cool. Yeah.
it'll take you back. But I want to kind of switch gears right now and talk about your life
Okay.
and reinvention because I feel like
Yeah.
your story is a lot of reinvention, right? But I want to start at the very beginning because my father, who is no longer with us, but he would be so upset if I didn't ask this question about Sammy Davis Jr. because the Rat Pack was his thing, right?
All right.
So you were recruited by Sammy Davis Jr.
Right. Yeah.
as a young singer and dancer. And I don't know if it was something that I read or I was listening to a podcast that you were on and you were saying how when you were growing up, because you were a girl, it was the dancer part of it and you didn't get the guitar lessons or the musical lessons. So it sounds like you were already a talent at that age. What was that like? Tell me about that experience of all of a sudden, holy cow, I'm a dancer for Sammy Davis Jr.
Right. Yeah. It was amazing. So yeah, I started dancing when I was 6 or 7 years old. My parents put me in dance lessons so I could be graceful to get a husband. And they didn't want their only daughter hanging out with musicians. So ironically, I fell in love with a musician. But yeah, so the Sammy Davis Jr. job, I think I was least prepared for that audition of any audition ever. And I don't know, maybe that's why I got it. But I remember I would drive over. So I was living in West Hollywood at the time, and I would drive over to Hollywood Boulevard to a newsstand and pick up the casting call, I think it was called. It was a magazine. And here you go again, no internet, right?
Yep.
So I'd pick up the magazine and start So I was sitting in my car on Hollywood Boulevard and I was leafing through the auditions and I saw right there an audition. I think it was in 2 hours, right somewhere in Hollywood, and Sammy Davis Jr. show, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to go. So I ran home really quick, showered, got ready, went back over, but, I hadn't even thought of I walked in and they're like, "What do you wanna sing?" And I went, "Well, I don't know, Summertime in the Key of C." And I maybe because of that nonchalance or whatever, I got a call back, and then the call back was actually at, I don't know if you're familiar with this name, Leslie Bricusse. Leslie Bricusse was a British, composer, producer of shows, musicals, etcetera, and so I got a call back, but it was at his house in Bel Air. So I went to his house and I sat with him in his little office, cubby, nice, beautiful office, a small office. And we talked about the show and everything. And then, boom, there I was. I was in the show and I was like, this is crazy. I was absolutely blown away. So we ended up rehearsing in Hollywood, rehearsing in New York, and then we opened in San Diego. And then we went to Century City. We were at the Schubert Theater in Century City, which I don't think is there anymore. And then we came to Chicago, my first time in Chicago, and now I live in Chicago. So now it was 1978, and we played at the Ari Crown Theater at McCormick Place in Chicago. And then we went to New York and we danced. I danced and performed at Lincoln Center. I mean, it was just amazing and just, incredible. So 4 months, I was 4 months with him, on the show.
That's awesome. I just, ugh, I have chills just even thinking about like what that experience would have been like.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So you went from performing to building an agency to producing television, then teaching and now writing. How did you know when it was time for your next chapter?
That's a really good question, and I tell people, I've never really been able to survive if I'm not passionate about what I'm doing. If I start to get bored and I just can't do it. So I have walked away from security situations. I remember, for example, when this was before Sammy Davis Jr. show, and I was living in West Hollywood just before I got the show. And I would take temp jobs, temp secretarial jobs when I wasn't on a show. And I was working for an insurance company in a high rise in Century City, and they offered me a full-time job with benefits and pension and the whole nine yards. And I was 25, 26, probably 26, 20, 26 at the time. So, you're starting to think about, your future. And I turned him down. And I knew I could not do that job. I was a movement centered person at that point. I just couldn't sit still. So the idea of sitting at a desk all day, I knew I just couldn't do it. So I turned that down, kept auditioning, and then I got the Sammy Davis Jr. job, right? So and then I came after the Sammy Davis Jr. job, I got married. So I decided I didn't want to be on the road anymore. And that's when I started teaching aerobics. So it was the Jane Fonda craze. And so that was really cool because I could get free childcare at the clubs that I taught. I could stay in shape, and it kind of fed my performing, because I could be up in front of a group and get them going and have fun, dancing, and I could pretty much like kind of just spontaneously create stuff on the spot. So I fed that really was a perfect job for me for quite a long time. And the only reason I started the agency was the '94 earthquake happened, the Northridge earthquake, and I lost my job. So I had this really cush job. I'd also become a certified personal fitness trainer. So I was doing fitness training on the side and teaching aerobics. And it gave me the time to be with my kids. So I had the two boys at that time. So, it gave me, my hours, I was flexible so I could hang out, I could go to their sports games and things like that, be there for them. And then the '94 Northridge earthquake happened, and I lost that job. Literally, the roof fell in on the building where I was working, teaching, and the earthquake was at 4:30 in the morning, and I was supposed to be there at 8:30 that morning for a class. So it was lucky that it happened so early. And my husband was retired now, TV and film editor. And he had been kind of pushing me. He said, "Yeah, come on, let's start this agency and we'll represent post production, and that way we'll have." Because he was a freelance editor, so we never knew when how long his job was going to last or whatever. So after the earthquake, I didn't have a job, and he finally persuaded me to start the agency. So that was interesting because I had an agent, as a performer, but I had never run an agency. I'd never formed an agency. I had never been an agent. So there were a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure that one out. But it took off. We were like one of the first, well, arguably the first boutique agency that was representing post production. Yeah. So it really took off. And, but then I went through the divorce, and then the agency, kind of fell apart. So, yeah.
So, from the time era that you grow up, you kind of led a pretty unconventional life for that time, right? Because a lot of women there were either in that period, you were either married right away, or like you said, you had a job that had security and you kept that job. Do you think that it was because of the way your parents raised you? I see a lot of times when people come from such a musical talented family that their upbringing is quote unquote unconventional, and they have the freedom in themselves to be able to do these things more. Or on the opposite, they kind of rebel against their parents and do it anyway. Do you think that that's what kind of brought you into that? Did your upbringing, did your parents give you that freedom, I guess, to be who you were?
I think, first of all, the musical experience, and the musical, I had a really good ear. I was around my dad and mom, and my mom used to sing harmony in my ear. So, I just, I fell in love with music. And in fact, I was a dancer, but I couldn't let go of the music. That's why I went into musical theater because, I just couldn't be in a dance troupe. That just wasn't, I had to sing. So there was that, but I actually think that it was my dad. My dad was kind of the adventurous. He just had this kind of really. Lots of ideas, lots of, and like for example, okay, at one point he took a new job in New York City. A friend of his asked him if he could run the sales office or whatever in New York City. And he said, okay. So he went to New York, and then we followed him. The whole family went over there, and we lived in Connecticut for like a year and a half. The job didn't work out. He ended up coming back to LA. But when we came back to LA, he must have read like Jack Kerouac's On the Road or something, because we got a VW bus. This was 1963, 64, and he piled all five of us, my mom, my dad, my two brothers, and me, and a dog, into this VW bus, and we traveled across country for 2.5 months like this. So, that's the kind of guy he was. He was really, I don't know. I think I got my spirit from him. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Um, how do you avoid getting trapped by labels? Because the vibe that I get from you is you're not one thing, you are who you are. You're not just this. You're not just a dancer. You're not just a mom. You're not just an author. You're Debora. You are who you are. So how do you avoid those labels, or how did you, even when it was so like everybody had to have a label, right? You were this, you were a wife, you were, how did you internally and externally avoid those labels?
That's a good question. I mean, I never thought about that. I never thought about labels, I guess. I was just, I really just, and again, I think I got this from my father. I love to learn. I've said, I can get excited about just about anything, especially with the internet now. It's like you can deep dive into, centipedes if you want. Oh wow, this is really interesting. I just have had this love of learning my whole life, and so I guess I just kind of like, and there were certain things that I was truly passionate about from the age of really from the age of 12: dance and French. Those were two things, and I just followed that path. And so if you kind of look at those two things, okay, dance and then the music, right? So, that was the path of performing and aerobics and all of that. Because does dance exist without music? That's a really, really good question. Um, so there was that part, and then there was the French part. So I was a bookworm. I love, I worked at the library when I went to college. I love to read. So, there was that side of me, which was just very late in, coming to, I mean, if anybody had told me I would write a book, I wouldn't have believed them. But if you look at my background, I think it's not out of the question that that would happen. And then when I was writing this book, I found out I really like it. So I'm actually writing another book now.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I've got another book
You
coming up.
Speaking of you love to learn, you went back to school as an adult, French, and then you got your master's, and then you learned how to play bass guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and you've already kind of told us that you don't like to sit for long or whatever, but why? I'm really curious. Why bass?
Oh, yeah. Well, I never really called myself a musician. Now, I have to say, in the book, Grace plays piano, and that's made up. I I can poke around and, I know music a little bit, but I never played piano. That was added just so that she would have some type of a little bit more musical connection.
Mhm.
So, I never called myself a musician. I mean, I sang only. I did not play an instrument. I played a little bit of guitar in high school, but I didn't know what I was playing. I just memorized the chords. I was in a folk trio. Um, so, fast forward, I was back with Michael, back with Craig, and he had, guitars everywhere, drums, everything. So I picked up the guitar again, and he was teaching me a little bit, and I was starting to learn music theory finally. And but it just wasn't working too well. But then there was a bass sitting there, and one day I picked up the bass, and I just went, oh my God, I finally found my instrument. Now that's only 14 years ago. I finally found my instrument. I am like so happy because I'm finally calling myself a musician. I finally feel comfortable saying I'm a musician because the bass helped me and Craig helped me learn music theory. So I picked up the bass and I jokingly say 6 strings was too much. The guitar, 6 strings was too much for me. 4 strings I can handle. And so the bass has taken the place of dancing for me because I can't really dance anymore. I've got arthritis in my knees and, whatever. And and by the way, I don't miss it. So don't feel bad. I don't miss dancing. I'm okay. But the bass being rhythmic, the bass is all about rhythm. Rhythm and melody, I think, are the two keys to bass playing. And so from being a dancer, I can count anything. And I've got that rhythm in me. So it's just coming out of my fingers now instead of, my body. So,
I
or
love it.
my feet. So,
So you play right now? Do you play like live or you where I mean, on a Friday night, can we find you at like the local pub in Chicago or like
well, I am in a band and I'm having a blast. I joined a band last July and it just kind of happened. I moved to Chicago 3 years ago and I was looking for a handyman and I got this handyman, Dave. And he came over a couple of times and he saw my bass and I don't know, nothing happened. And then finally last July he came over and he goes, "You play bass?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, we're kind of looking for a bass player. You want to come over?" And I'm like, "Okay." And it was sort of like spur of the moment. And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Okay, it's tonight." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I think if it had been the following week, if I had waited, I would have probably talked myself out of it. But it was that night and I went over and it just clicked. And I'm pinching myself. I cannot believe I'm a bass player in a band and I'm singing. So I'm playing bass and, I'm starting to get to the point where I can play and sing at the same time. And, but we're not playing out that much. We're hoping to maybe, play more. We did a house concert a couple of weeks ago. And so right now we're not playing out too much, but yeah, it's a fun band, really fun.
I'm sensing a theme here, Deborah, because the Sammy Davis Jr. thing, that was 2 hours and then you went and you crushed it, right? Now with this band, you didn't talk yourself out of it because it was that night.
Yeah, I know. So,
It's those last minute things.
what I learned a lesson. Okay, when I was dancing at Lincoln Center in the Sammy Davis Jr. show, I would go early and warm up in some of they have these beautiful rehearsal studios below Lincoln Center, below the main floor. And one day I went over there and I couldn't find any rehearsal room free. They were all busy. I walked down this hallway, opened the door, and there was Mikhail Baryshnikov, the dancer, right? Ballet dancer, Mikhail Baryshnikov. And I was like, oh, and I shut the door and I turned around and started walking back down the hallway. Halfway down the hallway, I thought to myself, well, maybe he's finished and he's leaving. This would give me an opportunity to talk to Mikhail Baryshnikov. So I almost talked myself out of it. It's like, oh no, he's, yeah. And I finally thought, no, I turned around and I walked back in. And I said, excuse me, I'm looking for a place to warm up. And I was just wondering, are you finished or whatever? He goes, no, no, but I'm waiting for my partner and the pianist to come. Please, by all means, come on in and warm up. And I'm like, oh my God. So I went to the back of the rehearsal studio and I'm like, here I am doing my little ballet bar, while Mikhail Baryshnikov is standing there. I think he was smoking a cigarette. And then all of a sudden, Patricia McBride, his partner, the ballerina, walks in and with a pianist, and they start rehearsing. And I'm the only other person in the room. So I sat down and I watched the rehearsal. So that taught me that day. Carpe diem, or I say carpe minutum, carpe secundum. Take that. Don't talk yourself out of things. And since then I've sort of like, okay, say yes, try it. Who knows? Make them, make a fool of yourself. Why not?
That's what a life you've led. I'm just wow, that's amazing.
I hope it can inspire people to feel it, go for it, be passionate about something and go for it. We learn by our mistakes, by the way. We don't learn by being perfect. It's by
Yeah.
our mistakes that we learn stuff, right? Try.
Well, that's a good point. And speaking of inspiring people, I have my listeners, they're 40s, 50s, 60s, and they are wondering now. I mean, I was doing the same thing myself. Can I start something new? I mean, and it's always am I too old? Do I even know? Can I even still learn? So what would you say to the woman who thinks that she missed her chance?
Yeah. An 80 something year old woman said something to me about 10 years ago. And I'm going to be 76 this next month.
You
Okay.
look incredible.
Thank you. So she said to me about 10 years ago, she said, take age out of the equation. Don't think about it. And it's been hard for me too. I mean, there are times when I go, why are you doing this? You're too old. Like the bass, right? Why are you trying to learn bass? I mean, look at you. You're so old. And why? Because I enjoy it.
Mhm.
Right? And it keeps me young. I mean, learning music is great for your brain. Learning a language is great for your brain. Learning is great for your brain, period, right? So take that. Don't go there. I'm too old. The other thing I think sometimes is, well, I should let the young people do it. It's like I'm taking the place of younger people. That to me also is not the right thoughts because young people can learn from older people and hopefully I have out of my experiences and everything some wisdom that I can share with young people and I've never had any young people feel be mad at me because I'm hanging out. They're like, oh cool, come on, hang out. I mean, it keeps me young. I hang out with younger people too, but I think you know fear. We talk ourselves out of things because of fear.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, so I have arthritis in my knees, I have arthritis in my back. It's been diagnosed, right? Okay. But I walk every day. And recently, I've been kind of doing just a little bit of jogging, just very gentle, just kind of moving up and down a little bit. And in my mind, I'm going, you shouldn't be doing this. This is going to kill you. It's going to hurt you even more. And all this fear, fear, fear. But guess what? It feels good.
Mhm.
I'm in my gut, I'm like, this feels good. So I'm not obviously going to do a marathon or something like that, but I'm trying to cut out the fear, cut out those negative thoughts. The other thing I want to share, which I've been working on, I realized, I don't know, 15 years ago, it's like we are really good at trying, like, okay, our brain can tell my hand to move and pick up this glass, right? No problem. But when it comes to our thoughts, we are so bad at being able to control our thoughts. We can control our movement, I can sit up, I can stand up, I can sit down, I can control my movements. I want to be able to control my thoughts. So I've been working really hard on that for quite a few years now. And a lot of it has to do with fear, you know, don't be afraid. You know, be joyful, live your life as fully as possible, get involved. Don't be afraid of what people think of you, you know.
Other people's opinions of us aren't our business. I say it to my kids all the time, you know. I think the only fear that maybe I should have is the fear of regret. I don't want to be there on the last day going, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I would have started that, or why didn't I? And it's so inspiring, like just to see change all the time because we're afraid of change as especially as women. We're afraid to change. We're afraid to put ourselves out there. But why? Because that thought in our heads are saying no, don't do that.
Right. Yeah. What if this happens? What if this happens? You know, and you know, and worrying about what might happen, you know, try to cut out that worry because worrying about it right now, it hasn't happened. Right now, in the present tense, you know, you're fine, and you're worrying about something that might happen in the future. And then it doesn't happen, and you spend all that time worrying. It's like just cut out the worry.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
So we're I have a few rapid fire questions in a minute, but I'm really curious now about the new band that you're playing. What kind of music are you playing? What are you singing? What's your vibe?
We're doing like 70s, 80s, you know, a real kind of eclectic. The guitar player is the leader, Dave, and so he's kind of brings in a lot of music. He also writes, so he writes some really fun little songs. And then we have a female singer, and they're primarily the two lead singers, and they do a lot of harmony together. And then I'll add like a third harmony to the group. And yeah, it's drums, guitar, bass, and three singers. You know, myself as the third singer. But I am doing one solo song now. I've always been very afraid to sing by myself. So I had some trauma, a little bit of trauma when I was a young girl. And so I've always been very, very afraid to sing. I'm okay when I'm singing like harmony, even just two people, but when I'm by myself, I just get super nervous. So I've been working on that, and so I'm singing one solo song and playing the bass at the same time, which is a really I'm like
Wow,
so proud of myself. Yeah.
that's
So
amazing.
yeah, it's an old Johnny Mercer song called "I'm an Old Cowhand." Yeah, it's really fun.
You'll have to record it and send it to me because I
Okay.
want to see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have some rapid fire questions, but before we do that, again, I was listening to Freedom Quest on Spotify, and I will tell you two of the songs that really stuck out. But my favorite one was if they took all my songs away.
Um,
I That was such a cool jam. Like I really liked that one. What's your favorite Freedom Quest song?
oh man. I love them all. You know, I really do. I don't think I can choose one. You know, if I have to share with you one story though, Crutches. I don't know if you listened to that one, but Craig decided to change the words. He felt bad about some of the words that he wrote originally, so he actually did a new version of it in 2012 before he passed away. Yeah, so that's fun. But yeah, no, I love them all. I was just thinking if they took all my songs away, I'm trying to remember which ones are which. I probably don't have it, but there's one that's oh yeah, my time has come.
Mhm.
That is very dark. The
That's so
last
funny because
line,
that's the other one that I wrote down that I really liked.
the
I really
last line of that is my time has come. My gun is loaded, pointed at my head. I'm like, oh man, you know. But he was never like suicidal or anything. But you know, he was a great songwriter. I thought. He wrote and recorded songs from his first he got his first reel-to-reel tape deck and started recording at the age of 14. So that was 1962. And he died in 2020 and he recorded all the way up until the end. His last song
That's
was
true
called
passion.
Grateful. Yeah. Yeah, he was an amazing musician. So I love them all. I can't choose. I'll tell you. It's like and the band was so amazing. Great players, you know. It's very sad that it didn't work
out.
out, you know. But
Well, I mean, now we can listen to it. That's the greatest thing about the internet and streaming and everything else, right? I know that there's some tough stuff when it comes to being a musician and trying to get your music out there and trying to get monetized for it, but now we can listen to something that we never would have heard of before. That's
I know,
that's really
it's
cool.
I know he's really happy, you know. There he is up there.
Oh,
And this is the
looking
Freedom
down at
Dance
you.
Band over here. I don't know if you've seen that picture, but have you seen that picture of the
Yeah,
Freedom Dance Band? Yeah. So I'm in
yeah.
that. I'm in the orange blouse on the right-hand side of the tree.
That's what I thought. Like up, like standing right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then in front of me is David Benoit, who was the keyboard player, and he's had a great recording career. Of all the people in the band, he was the only one that really had a successful career. And he also has a jazz show on K-Jazz radio
Oh,
in Los Angeles.
wow.
So, you know, he had a really good career. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome. All right, so I just have a few rapid fire questions for you. First thing that pops in your mind. If your life was a novel, what would the title be right now? Not then, right now.
before I forget,
That's a great one.
I love that title. Yeah.
What about we've talked a lot about music, but I want to know what is the song that you put on when you're having a bad day? You're just down and out and you just need to pick me up. What's that song for you?
Lake Street Dive. It's a band called Lake Street Dive, and I absolutely love the female singer, the lead singer in that band. And there's a song, Nothing will bother you now. Nothing can stop you now, I think it's called. Beautiful song about, you know, female empowerment. And so, yeah, if you haven't heard Lake Street Dive, it's a great band. Yeah, from
And
Boston.
then last rapid fire question. If you could tell 14-year-old Deborah something right now, if you had to go back and say something about your life, what advice would you give her?
Well, don't be afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid. Yeah.
Well, can you tell my listeners, and again, we're going to link everything in the show notes like I always do, but where can they find you? Where can we find your book? Where can we find what you're doing next and follow you for your next novel?
Right. Yeah. On my website. So it's DeboraMasterson.com. And Deborah is spelled kind of unusual. It's Debora, no H. So Debora, DeboraMasterson.com.
Awesome. Deborah, this has been such a fun conversation. I can't wait to see all of the amazing things you do next. And I can't wait till you send me the recording of you singing by yourself with the bass guitar because we're
I
really looking forward to it.
will hand. Okay, you got
Thank you so much for
it, Jen.
being here today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I've had a lot of very special people on this podcast, and Deborah, she is right up there with them. What an amazing conversation we had. What an amazing life that she has, and what an inspiring woman she is. You know, my biggest takeaway is don't be afraid. Just do the thing, do the next thing. And you're never too old to start something new. And you're not a tree. You're not just stuck. So get out there and do something. I want to thank Deborah so much. Please make sure that you go out and get Freedom Quest for your summer read, for your father, your husband, your brother, whoever for Father's Day. It's a really good read. It's a really fun read. And go check out Deborah's website. Make sure you're following her on all the things to see what she does next. And like always, if this episode resonated with you, make sure that you like, share, follow, subscribe, do all of the things, and share it with a woman who really just needs to hear to not be afraid. Until next time, friends, this is the Midlife Edit. Let's make it a damn good chapter. That's it for today, and honestly, I could keep talking, but I'll let you go. If this episode resonated with you, the best thing you can do is share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear it, because we all have that person. And if you're not already subscribed to my newsletter, The Backstage Pass, come join us. It's where I get a little more personal, a little more behind the scenes, and a little more honest than I probably should be. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I'll see you next Tuesday.